So in chapter 20, we're going to talk about the lymphatic system. And it has a couple main functions. One of which, kind of the primary function, is returning interstitial fluid to your bloodstream. Last chapter, we mentioned that at the capillaries, where you're exchanging things, blood hydrostatic pressure is greater at the beginning of the capillary bed than osmotic pressure, and so you're pushing fluid and stuff, anything small enough to move out into the tissue fluids, right, from the capillaries. But at the end, the osmotic pressure is actually greater than the blood pressure, which is dipped, so you're sucking fluid back in. But you end up pushing out more fluid than you suck back in, which is not sustainable, right? If you keep dropping off more fluid at your tissues than you're picking up, then eventually you're just going to swell up and swell up and swell up at your tissues, right? And also your circulatory system is going to lose fluid and blood pressure is going to drop and drop and drop. And neither that swelling nor that blood pressure drop is a good thing. So you have to have a way of returning that fluid to the bloodstream. And so you have actually an extra set of capillaries called lymphatic capillaries next to your blood capillaries. And they pick up all this extra fluid and they return it to your bloodstream through a series of vessels that we'll talk about. But if someone leaves, a snack behind at your house after a party, you return it to them, but you don't return it to them just like as it was at the party with like a little bit of snack goo left in it, and then that gets moldy and cruddy and whatever, and then you just hand it back to them. No, if you are a good host, a good friend, you wash it first, right? If you're a good friend, you wash it and then you fill it with like cookies or something, and then you give it back. But that doesn't match with the analogy. So if you're a good friend, you clean it out first before you give it back to them. Similarly, the fluid that's been at your tissues has picked up a bunch of gunk and crap, and you want to clean it out before you put it back into your circulatory system, into your bloodstream. And so you have lymph nodes and other structures along the way to clean out this fluid as you're returning it to the bloodstream. And that brings us into the second major function of the lymphatic system, immunity. Because you're not just building up crud like old cellular debris and whatever, you're also building up, whatever bacteria or viruses happen to be in your tissue fluids are going to find their way into this fluid that you're returning to the bloodstream. And so we need an immune system, immune cells, to kill that stuff, clean it up before you return the fluid to your bloodstream. And also, it's a good place to detect what infections your body might have by looking in your lymphatic system. And so your immune system, which is a series of cells and chemicals and processes in your body, works very tightly with your lymphatic system, which is an actual anatomical organ system, to defend you from infection. Your lymphatic system involves cells, and we call those cells lymphocytes. And lymphocytes might sound familiar to you. We talked about them during the blood chapter. They're a type of leukocyte, meaning a type of white blood cell, but they're a special type that give you your specific immunity. Right? When you say that you're immune to something because of a vaccination or because you've had it in the past, lymphocytes are the reason that you're immune to that. Right? They make antibodies, for instance, which we're hearing a lot about these days. And in addition to the cells, you also have a fluid called lymph. So your blood isn't the only flowing liquid in your body. Lymph is also moving through vessels in your body. This is what your lymphocytes look like and your lymph, right? You may recognize these again from the blood chapter. They have a large round nucleus in the middle, and they're agranulocytes, so they have relatively smooth cytoplasm on the outside. In addition to the cells and the fluid, you also have vessels called lymphatic vessels, or sometimes just lymphatics. And these begin at your peripheral tissues, right, as capillaries, and they end by dumping into your veins, at your subclavian vein, shortly before that blood ends up re-entering your brachiocephalic vein in your heart. So they're one way. So your circulatory system is a circle, right? The veins connect to the heart and the arteries and the capillaries back to the veins, and it goes in one big circle. Lymphatic vessels are one way. They start in your tissues and they move back toward your heart, right, to your veins really, but close to your heart. And in addition to the cells and the fluids and the vessels that those fluids move through, you also have lots of lymphoid tissues and organs. The primary tissues and organs include places where lymphocytes are produced or mature. And we mentioned that lymphocytes are just white blood cells, and white blood cells are produced in the bone marrow, the red bone marrow. So red bone marrow is a primary lymphoid organ. And the thymus gland is another place where certain lymphocytes that we call T cells will mature. They're not born there. They're born in the red bone marrow, but they will mature in the thymus. And so that's a primary lymphoid organ. Secondary lymphoid tissues are places where lymphocytes will go kind of after they are produced and matured, and they will stand guard and look for infections and become active. And those are places like your lymph nodes. Your tonsils are lymphoid organs. Your appendix and spleen are lymphoid organs. And malt is not necessarily just a delicious kind of frozen milkshake. In this case, it is mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue. So you have lymphoid tissue in your mucous membranes that help protect you, again, from invading pathogens. And this is a general look at your lymphatic anatomy. You should get pretty familiar with this as you're studying. Notice that you have sets of lymph nodes in your neck called cervical, under your armpits called axillary, right, where your legs meet your groin called inguinal. These are all named after the regions of the body that you should be familiar with already after Bio 151. You also have a couple of thoracic ducts called your thoracic duct and your right lymphatic ducts. These are the largest and last lymphatic vessels that dump into the subclavian vein and return that lymphatic fluid back into your bloodstream. And this cisterna chyli here collects a lot of fluid from around your abdomen and ultimately up from your legs, and stores it to send it up through that thoracic duct to go back to your bloodstream.